The smell of recycled air mixed with nervous sweat filled the assembly chamber. David Reed ran his thumb across the smooth surface of his data pad for the third time in as many minutes. Around him, representatives from 47 different species talked in clusters, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, hums, and words in languages he still struggled to recognize. 8 years. That was how long humanity had been part of this galactic community, and sometimes it still felt like his first day. A Valari delegate named Quinn approached the central podium, his four arms gesturing with the kind of confidence that came from centuries of technological superiority. The chamber quieted down naturally. Everyone knew what was coming. Item 7 on the agenda: human military capabilities. David had been waiting for this moment since the Council first suggested integrating various species defense systems. We gather today to discuss the newest member's contribution to our collective security, Quinn announced, his translator converting the buzzing clicks into smooth galactic standard. The humans have been remarkably secretive about their weapons technology. We've seen their shields, adequate if simple. We've observed their engines, functional but unremarkable. Now we must evaluate their offensive capabilities. David stood slowly. The chamber's attention shifted to him like a physical weight. He had served 20 years in Earth's Navy before becoming a diplomat, and he knew exactly how this would play out. The Council expected to see projectile weapons, bullets maybe, chemical propellants, things they had abandoned thousands of years ago when they discovered plasma generation and particle acceleration. The human delegation appreciates the Council's interest, David said carefully. We're prepared to demonstrate our primary shipboard weapon system. I've arranged for the frigate Steadfast to move into position near the testing range. Quinn's mandibles clicked in what David had learned to recognize as amusement. A frigate? How modest. We accept your demonstration, Ambassador, though I hope you'll understand if we're not expecting miracles from kinetic projectiles. The comment drew polite laughter from several delegates. David smiled and said nothing. Let them laugh. They would stop soon enough. Director Paul, a Centran whose people were known for diplomatic neutrality, activated the observation screens that lined the chamber walls. The view showed empty space, a field of scattered asteroids marking the official testing zone. In the distance, a sleek human ship glided into position. The Steadfast was small compared to most Council vessels, barely 300 meters long, but she moved with precise grace. Target asteroid selected. Captain Helen Boyd's voice came through the comm system. David had served with Helen years ago. She was one of the best tactical officers in the fleet, calm under pressure and precise in execution. Standard reinforced test asteroid. According to Council specifications, it should withstand sustained plasma bombardment for approximately 40 minutes. Confirmed, Director Paul said, checking his own readings. Proceed when ready, Captain. David watched Quinn settle into his seat with relaxed confidence. Around the chamber, other delegates showed similar ease. They had all seen weapons tests before. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, particle beams that could slice through hulls, focused lasers that operated at temperatures hot enough to vaporize metals. They assumed they knew what was coming. The Steadfast positioned herself 3,000 kilometers from the target. It was an absurd distance for kinetic weapons by galactic standards. Most species had abandoned such systems precisely because getting physical projectiles to travel effectively across space combat ranges was considered impossible. Railgun charging, Helen's voice maintained its professional calm. Magnetic coils reaching optimal field strength, target lock confirmed, firing in 10 seconds. Quinn leaned toward the delegate beside him and whispered something that made them both click with amusement. David ignored them and focused on the screens. He had seen railgun tests before, but never with an audience that had no idea what they were about to witness. 5 seconds, field strength at maximum, projectile loaded 3, 2, 1, firing. The steadfast hull rippled with electromagnetic discharge. For a fraction of a second, the ship seemed to glow with contained energy. Then nothing. No visible beam, no plasma burst, no dramatic light show, just the ship hanging in space, apparently having done nothing at all. Did it malfunction? Someone asked from the back of the chamber. The target asteroid exploded. Not gradually, not piece by piece. It simply ceased to exist as a solid object. One moment there was a reinforced rock the size of a small building. The next moment there was an expanding cloud of vapor and fragments traveling outward at impossible speeds. The shockwave rippled through the nearby debris field, sending smaller asteroids tumbling away from the impact site. The chamber went absolutely silent. Every delegate stared at the screens showing the dissipating remains of the target. David watched their faces change as they processed what they had seen. Shock, confusion, and slowly the beginning of understanding. "What was the projectile velocity?" Director Paul asked quietly. Helen answered without hesitation. 7% light speed, tungsten steel core, magnetically accelerated through a 300-meter barrel, impact energy equivalent to approximately 400 kilotons. "Impossible," Quinn said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Kinetic weapons can't achieve those velocities. The energy requirements alone would drain a ship's entire power system." "Our electromagnetic systems are quite efficient," David replied. "And that was a single shot from one railgun. The Steadfast carries 6 of them." On the observation screens, long-range sensors tracked the projectile's continued trajectory. Despite having punched through an entire asteroid, the tungsten steel slug remained intact, traveling onward into deep space at the same devastating velocity. Director Paul's voice was barely audible. "Ambassador Reed, at what range is that weapon effective?" David glanced at his data pad, then back at the chamber full of aliens who suddenly looked very different than they had 5 minutes ago. "We haven't found its maximum range yet, Director. That particular model has a theoretical effective range of about 40,000 kilometers. The slug should remain lethal for considerably farther." The silence stretched on. Word spread through the station faster than light could travel through fiber optics. Within an hour, every military liaison, defense contractor, and strategic analyst in the facility had heard about the human demonstration. The casual quarterly security summit had transformed into an emergency session. The assembly chamber now held twice as many people as before, all of them wanting to understand what they had just witnessed. David sat at the human delegation table, watching analysts from a dozen different species argue over sensor readings and impact calculations. His data pad kept receiving messages, questions, requests for technical specifications, a few thinly veiled demands for immediate technology sharing. He ignored most of them and focused on the main discussion. "The energy signature doesn't match anything in our databases," a Keshari scientist said, her scales reflecting the light from multiple holographic displays. "There's electromagnetic discharge, yes, but the power levels required to achieve 7% light speed with a physical projectile should be impossible for a vessel that size." "Yet we all saw it happen," Director Paul responded. He looked tired. The calm neutrality he usually maintained had cracked around the edges. "Captain Boyd, perhaps you could explain the basic principles of this railgun system." Helen's image appeared on the main display. She stood in the Steadfast's weapon control room, surrounded by equipment that suddenly looked far more dangerous than it had an hour ago. "The principle is simple. We use electromagnetic coils arranged in series along a barrel. Each coil activates in sequence, creating a powerful magnetic field that accelerates a conductive projectile. The projectile itself carries part of the magnetic charge, so it continues to accelerate as it moves through each successive coil." "But the power requirements," Quinn interrupted. His earlier amusement had vanished completely. "To generate fields strong enough for those velocities, You would need to drain your entire ship's reactor. We use capacitor banks, Helen explained patiently. They charge over about 30 seconds from the ship's reactor, then discharge all at once through the coil system. Each railgun has its own dedicated power storage. We can fire all 6 weapons simultaneously if needed, though that requires about 2 minutes of charging time between volleys. A droll military observer leaned forward. What about recoil? A projectile moving at 7% light speed should produce enough backward force to compromise your ship's structural integrity. The ship masses about 40,000 tons, Helen said. The projectile masses about 200 kilograms. Basic physics applies. Yes, there's recoil, but it's manageable. We design our ships to handle the stress. David watched the chamber process this information. He could see the mental calculations happening behind their eyes. Humans had taken one of the oldest weapons concepts in existence and pushed it to extremes that made it competitive with energy weapons. More than competitive, actually. Energy weapons had limitations that physical projectiles simply didn't face. A junior analyst from the Valari delegation raised one of her smaller arms hesitantly. Ambassador Reed, I have a question about defensive countermeasures. How do your shields interact with these projectiles? David smiled. This was the question he had been waiting for. Our shields handle them reasonably well, actually. Energy shields provide minimal protection against solid objects at those velocities, so we use layered physical armor combined with electromagnetic deflection fields. It's not perfect, but it works. The chamber erupted. Every military mind in the room had just realized the same thing. Standard galactic shields were designed to deflect charged particles and absorb energy weapons. They did almost nothing against hypervelocity solid projectiles. Every ship in the galactic fleet was essentially unprotected against this weapon. Quinn stood abruptly. You're saying that our entire defensive doctrine is obsolete. Against railguns specifically, yes, David admitted. Though to be fair, we didn't know that when we developed them. We assumed everyone else had similar weapons. Kinetic projectiles are such a basic concept that it never occurred to us they had fallen out of use. Fallen out of use because they were inefficient, Quinn said sharply. Chemical propellants can't achieve the ranges needed for space combat. Electromagnetic acceleration was theoretically possible, but required too much power for practical application. You stopped trying, David said simply. We kept working on the problem. Better superconductors, more efficient capacitors, stronger materials that could handle the magnetic stress. It took us 200 years to develop combat-effective railguns, but we got there. Director Paul raised his hand for silence. The gesture took several minutes to have effect as delegates continued their urgent discussions. Finally, the chamber quieted enough for him to speak. We need to understand the full scope of this technology. Captain Boyd, the Steadfast is classified as a frigate. Is that correct? Yes, Director. She's a light escort vessel. We use frigates for patrol duty and convoy protection. And what classification carries heavier weaponry? Helen's expression didn't change, but David noticed her slight pause. Destroyers carry longer barrel railguns with enhanced capacitor systems. Cruisers mount multiple batteries with targeting systems designed for fleet engagement. Battleships carry the heavy models, railguns with 1,000-meter barrels capable of accelerating projectiles to 12% light speed. The chamber went quiet again. David had lost count of how many times that had happened in the past 2 hours. Each new piece of information seemed to hit the council like a physical blow. How many of these vessels does humanity possess? The Keshari analyst asked carefully. David pulled up the information on his data pad, though he had already memorized it. Our current active fleet consists of 48 frigates, 36 destroyers, 12 cruisers, and 4 battleships. We're commissioning 16 more vessels this year, mostly frigates and destroyers, but 2 additional cruisers are under construction. A Centran delegate who had been quiet until now finally spoke. You've built an entire fleet around a weapons system that makes standard defenses irrelevant, and you're expanding that fleet. It wasn't a question. We're building a fleet capable of defending human space and our allies, David corrected gently. The weapons systems we use are a natural result of our technological development. We're not trying to threaten anyone. We're just doing what we've always done, protecting ourselves and those we care about. Quinn slumped back in his seat. The galaxy needs to know about this. Every species will need to reconsider their military strategy. The galaxy already knows, Director Paul said quietly, gesturing to the packed chamber. News of this demonstration has spread to every major system. By tomorrow, everyone will be talking about human railguns. He looked directly at David. The question now is what humanity intends to do with this advantage. The cargo hauler moved through neutral space like any other commercial vessel making routine deliveries. Its shields hummed at standard power. Its transponder broadcast identification and manifest data to anyone who cared to scan. 3 similar freighters traveled alongside it, all of them registered to human shipping companies. Together, they carried medical supplies, manufactured goods, and agricultural equipment bound for colonies in the outer sectors. The escort destroyer Relentless maintained position 2,000 kilometers ahead of the convoy. She ran dark, her profile minimized to make her harder to spot on long-range scans. Captain Roger Hayes preferred quiet runs where nothing happened. He had been doing convoy protection for 6 years, and the best trips were always the boring ones. Contact, his sensor officer announced. Multiple signatures dropping out of hyperspace. Bearing 273, range 50,000 kilometers. Roger checked his display. 12 ships had just appeared on sensors. Their configurations matched known pirate vessels, a mixture of converted freighters and outdated military hulls. The Broken Claw Syndicate, based on their paint schemes and formation patterns. They were one of the larger criminal organizations operating in this region. All freighters, this is Relentless. Increase shield strength and maintain current heading. Do not deviate from course. Roger kept his voice calm. Panic served no purpose. The freighters acknowledged his transmission and continued moving. Their shields strengthened, energy readings climbing as they diverted power from non-essential systems. The pirate ships accelerated toward the convoy. They spread out in a standard attack formation, designed to hit targets from multiple angles simultaneously. Roger had seen this maneuver 100 times in training simulations. The pirates assumed they had overwhelming numerical advantage. 12 combat-capable ships against 1 destroyer and 4 unarmed freighters. Simple mathematics. They're hailing us, the communications officer said. Put it through. Roger waited for the channel to open. A scarred alien face appeared on his screen. Tavik's species didn't have a name in Galactic Standard, but Roger recognized the distinctive ridge patterns and predatory eyes. The pirate boss controlled significant territory in the outer sectors. Human vessel, you are interfering with a salvage operation, Tavik said, using the standard pirate euphemism for robbery. Power down your weapons and withdraw. Your cargo ships are now property of the Broken Claw Syndicate. Negative, Roger replied simply. These vessels are under Earth military protection. Turn around and leave while you still can. Tavik's face split into what might have been a smile. I've heard stories about human weapons. Railguns, they call them. Primitive kinetic launchers. Do you really think 12 ships will run from 1 destroyer with metal slug throwers? He cut the transmission. Roger watched the pirate vessels continue their approach. They reached optimal plasma weapon range at 30,000 kilometers and opened fire. Bright bursts of superheated gas crossed the distance toward the convoy. The freighter's shields flared as they absorbed the impacts. Human shield technology had proven surprisingly robust. The freighters could take sustained fire for several minutes before their defenses failed. Railguns charged and ready, his weapons officer reported. Targeting solutions locked on all enemy vessels. Fire on the lead frigate, Roger ordered. Single shot. Let's see if they're paying attention. The Relentless barely shuddered as electromagnetic coils discharged. A 200-kilogram projectile accelerated to 7% light speed in less than a second. It crossed 30,000 kilometers almost instantly. The pirate frigate that had been leading the attack formation simply stopped moving. The railgun slug had entered through the bow, traveled the entire length of the ship, and exited through the engine compartment. Everything between those 2 points had been destroyed by the projectile's passage. The remaining pirate vessels scattered immediately. They boosted their shields to maximum power and tried to spread out, making themselves harder to target. Standard evasive tactics. Roger had expected this response. "Target the cruiser," he said calmly. "Let's demonstrate something for them." The second shot fired. This time the pirates saw it coming. The cruiser's captain did everything right. She maximized shield strength, angled her hull to present minimal profile, and initiated evasive maneuvers. The railgun slug passed through her forward shield as if it wasn't there, penetrated the hull, and exited through the opposite side. The cruiser's lights went dark as its power systems failed. Tavik's face reappeared on Roger's screen. The predatory confidence had vanished. "Wait, stop, we're withdrawing." "Too late for that," Roger said quietly. "You opened fire on protected cargo vessels. That's an act of piracy under Council law and Earth military code. All hostile ships will be disabled and held for authorities." 3 more pirates tried to run. The Relentless targeted their engine sections with precise railgun fire. Each shot traveled across tens of thousands of kilometers in under a second. Each shot penetrated shields and armor like they were made of paper. The ships went dead in space, their propulsion systems reduced to molten metal and broken components. The remaining 7 pirates surrendered. They powered down weapons, dropped shields, and transmitted unconditional surrender codes. Roger accepted their capitulation and transmitted coordinates for a holding position. Council patrol ships would arrive within 2 hours to take custody of the disabled vessels and their crews. "Damage report," Roger asked his tactical officer. "0 damage to Relentless. Forward shields at 97%. All freighters report intact with minor shield depletion. No casualties on our side." Roger nodded slowly. The entire engagement had lasted 3 minutes from first shot to final surrender. 12 pirate vessels against 1 destroyer. The mathematics had indeed been simple, just not in the way the pirates had calculated. He opened a general broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Captain Roger Hayes of the Earth destroyer Relentless. Today's engagement serves as demonstration of Earth's commitment to protecting free commerce in neutral space. Any vessel that threatens human ships or our allies will face similar response. This is your only warning." Later, when the Council patrol arrived and began collecting the disabled pirate vessels, their commander contacted Roger directly. "Captain Hayes, your efficiency is remarkable. We've been trying to suppress the Broken Claw Syndicate for years. You've just eliminated their primary strike force in 3 minutes." "Just doing our job," Roger replied. "Though I suspect word will spread quickly. Pirates talk to each other. They'll know what happened here." The patrol commander's expression shifted to something between respect and concern. "That's what worries me, Captain. When criminals are more afraid of human cargo escorts than they are of Council military forces, it changes the balance of power in this region." Roger ended the transmission and looked at his bridge crew. They had performed perfectly, calm and professional throughout the engagement. This was what human crews trained for: precision, efficiency, overwhelming response to any threat against those they protected. The Relentless resumed formation with the cargo convoy and continued toward their destination. Behind them, 12 disabled pirate ships drifted in space, silent testimony to the effectiveness of human railguns. News of the pirate engagement reached every major system within days. The footage had been recorded by the cargo freighters and council patrol ships. Someone leaked it to public networks. Within hours, billions of beings across the galaxy watched a single human destroyer systematically disable 12 pirate vessels in 3 minutes. The discussion boards exploded with analysis, speculation, and fear. In a darkened station on the Outer Rim, Tavik played the combat footage for the 7th time. He had survived the engagement because his ship had been one of the first to surrender. Now he watched his entire operation fall apart in high-definition clarity. The human destroyer moved with casual precision. No wasted shots. No hesitation. Each railgun discharge placed exactly where it needed to be to disable rather than destroy. The humans could have killed everyone. They had chosen mercy, which somehow made them more terrifying. He shut down the display and composed a message. It went out on encrypted channels to every major criminal organization in 3 sectors. The text was simple. Humans are not targets. Mark all Earth vessels as protected. Mark all human allies as protected. Anyone who touches a human ship answers to me personally. This is not negotiable. Similar messages spread through the criminal networks. Pirates who had operated for decades suddenly found themselves avoiding entire shipping lanes. Insurance rates for human cargo vessels dropped by 70% in a single week. Stations that had been pirate havens started refusing to harbor anyone who admitted to attacking human ships. The balance of power in neutral space had shifted overnight. The Galactic Council convened an emergency technology summit 6 months after the original railgun demonstration. David found himself sitting in the same assembly chamber, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The casual dismissal of human technology had been replaced by desperate interest. 17 species had submitted formal requests for information about electromagnetic projectile systems. "We need to discuss integration," Director Paul began without preamble. "Multiple member species are attempting to develop their own railgun technology. Progress has been limited. Ambassador Reed, would humanity be willing to share technical specifications?" David had prepared for this question. "We're open to cooperation with allied species. However, railgun development requires substantial infrastructure investment. The electromagnetic systems alone require materials science and power generation capabilities that took us 2 centuries to refine. Most species would need to completely rebuild their industrial base." A Valari engineer stood, not Quinn. The former security director had been reassigned after the initial demonstration. This new representative seemed more focused on technical problems than political positioning. "We've attempted to recreate your capacitor systems. The energy density required exceeds our current material capabilities. How did you solve the discharge heat problem?" "Superconducting composites," Helen Boyd answered. She had been invited to provide technical consultation. "We developed crystalline matrices that can handle enormous current flows without degradation. The manufacturing process requires zero-gravity conditions and extreme precision. Each capacitor bank takes about 3 months to construct." 3 months per weapon system, the Valari engineer said weakly. "We estimated 6 years to build even a prototype." "You'll get faster with experience," Helen said encouragingly. "We're willing to share basic specifications and provide technical advisors, though I should mention that railguns are one of our simpler weapons systems." The chamber went quiet. David suppressed a smile. He had told Helen to drop that information casually. The impact was exactly what he had hoped for. "Simpler systems," Director Paul asked carefully. "What other weapons does humanity possess?" David pulled up a holographic display. "Railguns are our standard ship-to-ship weapons. We also developed coil guns, which use similar principles but with different coil configurations. Gauss rifles for personnel. Mass drivers for planetary bombardment, though we don't use those for anything except asteroid mining now. Missile systems with various payloads. and nuclear weapons, though those are primarily defensive. The word nuclear caused visible reactions throughout the chamber. Species that didn't have facial expressions still managed to convey alarm through body language and color changes. Nuclear weapons. A Centran delegate sounded horrified. You split atoms for military purposes. Yes, David confirmed simply. We developed them about 400 years ago. They're quite effective, though we prefer precision weapons for most applications. Nuclear devices are mostly useful for area denial and as deterrents. A Keshari scientist who had been quiet until now finally spoke. Ambassador, I've studied human technological development through available records. Your species pursued weapons advancement with remarkable focus. You developed electromagnetic launchers, atomic weapons, chemical agents, and biological countermeasures. This is not typical evolutionary pattern. We developed weapons assuming we would face enemies with similar capabilities, David explained. Earth's history involved substantial conflict between different human nations. We competed for resources and territory for thousands of years. Peace only came when the weapons became destructive enough that war stopped being profitable. By then, we had refined killing into a precise science. The chamber absorbed this information uncomfortably. Most galactic species had developed space travel during their cooperative phases. Wars happened, but they were brief conflicts over specific resources. The idea of millennia-long arms races was foreign to them. Quinn appeared on a communication screen. He had been reassigned to military research. Ambassador Reed, humanity is being offered a position as primary defensive force for Council territory. Multiple species are requesting military technology exchange programs. Some delegates have expressed concern about consolidated military power under human control. What assurances can you provide? David stood and addressed the chamber directly. Humanity seeks partnership, not domination. Yes, our weapons are effective. Yes, we have military advantages. But power without responsibility is tyranny, and we've learned that lesson the hard way on Earth. We're offering to help defend Council space because it's the right thing to do, because neighbors help each other, because we believe in the principles this Council represents. He paused and looked around the room. But let me be clear about something. We will not give up our weapons. We will not reduce our military capability. We've spent too long developing the means to protect ourselves. What we will do is use that capability to protect others as well. Anyone who allies with humanity gains our protection. Anyone who threatens our allies faces our response. Director Paul nodded slowly. The Council recognizes humanity's position. We propose a defensive pact. Human military forces would be integrated into Council security operations. Technology sharing would occur on a case-by-case basis with allied species. Does this seem acceptable? David glanced at his data pad, where messages from Earth government had been arriving throughout the discussion. They had anticipated this offer and prepared response parameters. We accept in principle. Details need to be negotiated, but humanity is committed to galactic security. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates looked relieved. Others appeared concerned. A few seemed calculating, already trying to figure out how to leverage the new power dynamics. David sat down and waited for the noise to settle. This was just the beginning. The Drawl Collective had been expanding for 200 years. They controlled 40 systems through a combination of military force and strategic intimidation. Their ships were heavily armed with plasma artillery capable of sustained bombardment. Their soldiers were bred for combat, stronger and more aggressive than most species. They had fought the Centrans to a standstill 15 years ago. They had crushed a Keshari rebellion in 3 weeks. They did not fear the Galactic Council. Ambassador Reth stood before the Council Assembly with all 4 of his arms crossed in the traditional Drawl gesture of defiance. His species did not bow. They did not negotiate from weakness. They certainly did not tremble at stories about primitive human weapons. The Drawl Collective finds the Council's recent military arrangements unacceptable, Reth announced. His voice carried the deep resonance common to his people. You have granted unprecedented authority to a species that has been part of galactic civilization for less than a decade. You have allowed these humans to position military vessels throughout Council space. You have given them defensive pacts that infringe on Drawl territorial rights. David listened from his position at the human delegation table. He had known this confrontation was coming. The Drawl had been testing Council borders for months, making territorial claims that violated established agreements. The Council had always backed down before. That pattern was about to change. The defensive pacts respect all established territorial boundaries, Director Paul responded carefully. No human vessels have entered Drawl space. The Council's security arrangements do not threaten the collective. You misunderstand, Reth said, his tone hardening. We do not fear threat. We oppose the principle. The galaxy does not need human protection. The galaxy certainly does not need weapons that bypass civilized defensive systems. Civilized defensive systems, David repeated quietly. Is that what you call shields that only work against energy weapons? Systems designed to make warfare less lethal to your own ships while you bombard others. Reth turned to face David directly. You speak of civilization, human. Your species developed atomic weapons. You refined killing to a science. You built entire fleets around projectiles designed to punch through hulls and kill crews. Do not lecture the Drawl about civilized warfare. I'm not lecturing anyone, David said calmly. I'm pointing out that defensive systems that only protect you while leaving others vulnerable aren't defensive. They're strategic advantages masquerading as protection. Our railguns just removed that advantage. The chamber buzzed with uncomfortable conversations. Several species shifted in their seats. The Drawl had been the dominant military force in their region precisely because their heavy armor worked well against Council weapons. Human railguns negated that advantage completely. The Drawl Collective will not adjust our defensive posture because you wave primitive slug throwers, Reth declared. We have conquered 40 systems. We have shattered fleets. We will not be intimidated by kinetic weapons. Nobody's trying to intimidate you, David replied evenly. But if you're planning military action against Council members, you should understand what you'll be facing. Reth's posture shifted into what David recognized as an aggressive stance among his people. Is that a threat, Ambassador? It's a statement of fact. The Council has defensive pacts. If you attack Council territory, you'll face Council defense forces. Those forces now include human ships. Then perhaps the Drawl need to demonstrate that human weapons are not as fearsome as the Council believes. Reth uncrossed his arms. The collective has been considering expansion into the Crest sector. The Centran colony there occupies territory that rightfully belongs to the Drawl by ancient claim. We will be taking that system within the month. Director Paul stood abruptly. Crest is under Council protection. Any military action against that colony will be considered an act of war against the Council itself. Then we will be at war, Reth said simply. He turned and walked from the chamber, his delegation following behind him. The massive doors closed with a sound like thunder. David immediately activated his communication link to Earth Command. This is Ambassador Reed. The Drawl are planning military action against Crest Colony. We need fleet deployment authorization. Admiral Patricia Stone's image appeared on his private display. She commanded the human task force assigned to Council security operations. We've been monitoring the situation. How soon? They said within the month. My guess is 3 weeks. They'll want time to position their fleet, but not enough time for us to gather overwhelming force. Understood. I'm moving the task force to Crest immediately. 6 destroyers and 2 cruisers. That should be sufficient. David did some quick mental calculations. The Drawl would likely send at least 15 ships, possibly more. 8 human vessels against superior numbers. But numbers had stopped mattering the moment humanity introduced railguns to galactic warfare. 3 weeks later, David stood in the observation deck of the orbital station above Crest. The agricultural colony spread out below, peaceful and unaware of the military forces gathering to protect it. The human task force had arrived 2 days ago and taken up defensive positions around the planet. Admiral Stone ran her ships through continuous drills, refining coordination and targeting protocols. "Contact," the station's sensor operator announced. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace, drawl signatures, 15 vessels confirmed. David watched the tactical display as red icons appeared at the edge of the system. The drawl fleet formed up in their standard assault pattern, heavy cruisers at the front, supported by lighter vessels designed for sustained plasma bombardment. It was an intimidating sight, a fleet that had conquered systems and broken military forces. Admiral Stone's voice came through the communication system. "All ships, this is Stone. Maintain defensive formation. Wait for their move. Railguns charged and ready." The drawl fleet began its approach. They moved slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone could see their strength. David recognized the tactic: psychological warfare. Show overwhelming force and hope the enemy surrenders without fighting. A transmission came through from the drawl flagship. Commander Gret appeared on screen, his armor decorated with symbols of conquest. "Human vessels, you are ordered to withdraw from drawl space. This system now belongs to the collective. Leave or be destroyed." Admiral Stone's response was calm and professional. "This is Admiral Patricia Stone of the Earth Defense Force. Crest Colony is under Council protection. Turn your fleet around and leave. This is your only warning." Gret's expression twisted into something that might have been amusement. 8 ships against 15. You humans are either brave or foolish. We will demonstrate the difference. He cut the transmission. David gripped the observation railing and watched the drawl fleet accelerate toward the planet. This was it, the moment that would determine whether human military power was real or just fortunate timing against pirates. The drawl fleet crossed into effective plasma weapon range and opened fire immediately. Bright streams of superheated gas crossed the distance between their heavy cruisers and the human formation. The human ships' shields flared as they absorbed the impacts. Admiral Stone had positioned her vessels in a defensive sphere around Crest, forcing the drawl to spread their fire across multiple targets. "Shields holding at 85%, the tactical officer reported from the destroyer Hamilton. "Enemy is maintaining bombardment pattern." Stone watched the enemy formation on her tactical display. The drawl were using standard doctrine, overwhelming firepower concentrated on specific targets until shields failed. It worked well against most species. Human shields were more robust than galactic standard, but they would eventually fail under sustained fire. The drawl were counting on that. "All ships begin evasive pattern Delta 7, Stone ordered. Maintain minimum range of 40,000 kilometers. Do not let them close." The human vessels broke formation and began moving in coordinated patterns. They didn't scatter randomly. Each ship knew exactly where the others would be at any given moment. They wove between drawl firing solutions while maintaining their own targeting locks. It was a dance they had practiced hundreds of times in simulation. Commander Gret watched the human ships maneuver with growing frustration. They refused to engage at close range where drawl plasma artillery was most effective. They kept dancing just outside optimal firing distance, their shields absorbing hits but never taking concentrated fire long enough for the drawl to break through. "Close the distance," Gret ordered. "Full acceleration. All ships converge on the lead human cruiser." The drawl fleet tightened formation and accelerated. This was their standard breakthrough tactic: concentrate force on a single target, overwhelm its defenses, eliminate it, then move to the next. 15 ships against 8 meant they could afford losses. The humans would run out of targets to defend long before the draw ran out of firepower. Admiral Stone saw the draw formation shift and smiled grimly. They're committing. All ships, execute firing solution Alpha. Target their heavy cruisers first. The human fleet opened fire. 8 railguns discharged simultaneously. 8 tungsten steel projectiles accelerated to 7% light speed. They crossed 40,000 kilometers in less than a second. The draw fleet's shields were designed to deflect plasma and absorb energy beams. They did absolutely nothing against solid projectiles traveling at relativistic velocities. The lead draw cruiser took a railgun slug directly through its main reactor. The ship's lights went dark instantly as its power systems failed. A second cruiser suffered a hit to its propulsion section. Its engines exploded, sending the vessel into an uncontrolled spin. A third lost its entire weapon array when a projectile carved through the sections housing its plasma generators. "Impossible," Gret whispered. His tactical display showed 3 heavy cruisers disabled in the space of 2 seconds. How did they penetrate our shields? "Railguns don't care about shields," his tactical officer said quietly. "The projectiles are solid matter. Our energy barriers might as well not exist." The human ships fired again. This time they targeted the draw support vessels. Destroyers and frigates that had been positioned to provide covering fire found themselves struck by projectiles they couldn't see coming. Railgun slugs traveled faster than sensor systems could track at combat ranges. By the time a target knew it had been fired upon, the projectile had already hit. 7 more draw ships went dark. Some lost propulsion, others lost weapons. 2 suffered catastrophic hull breaches that forced immediate crew evacuation. The human targeting was precise, calculated to disable rather than destroy. They could have aimed for reactor cores and crew sections. They chose not to. 13 draw vessels disabled in under 3 minutes. The 2 remaining ships broke formation and attempted to flee. Admiral Stone let them go. She opened a general communication channel that broadcast to all draw vessels, including the ones that had just jumped to hyperspace. "This is Admiral Patricia Stone to all draw forces. Your attack on Crest Colony has failed. Your fleet is disabled, but your crews are alive. We will provide assistance with life support and rescue operations. Council patrol ships will arrive to take custody of your vessels within 6 hours. Consider this a demonstration of human capability and human restraint." Commander Gret sat in his command chair, surrounded by emergency lighting and the sound of damage control teams trying to restore basic systems. His ship's main reactor was gone. Propulsion was gone. Weapons were gone. His entire fleet had been systematically taken apart by 8 human vessels in less time than it took to brew morning tea. "Why didn't they destroy us?" he asked no one in particular. "They had us. They could have killed everyone." His tactical officer checked the damage reports. "Look at the targeting patterns, Commander. Every hit was precisely placed to disable specific systems. They avoided crew sections entirely. They could have done much worse." David watched the battle's conclusion from the orbital station. The human ships resumed their defensive positions around Crest, barely damaged. The draw fleet drifted in space, disabled but intact. Admiral Stone had demonstrated exactly what he had hoped she would. Not just human military capability, but human precision and control. The next day, Ambassador Reth requested an emergency meeting with the Council. David sat across from him in a private conference room. The Drawl ambassador looked diminished somehow, his aggressive posture replaced by careful neutrality. "The collective wishes to negotiate," Reth said quietly. "We underestimated human capability. We acted rashly. The attack on Crest was a mistake." "We know," David replied. "That's why your ships are intact and your crews are alive. We're not interested in conquest or revenge. We're interested in peace." "Peace?" Reth repeated the word as if testing its weight. The drawl respects strength. You have demonstrated considerable strength. Perhaps we can discuss boundaries and treaties. Within 2 weeks, the Drawl Collective signed a comprehensive peace agreement with the Council. They withdrew all territorial claims in disputed sectors. They agreed to non-aggression pacts with multiple species. They requested technical exchanges with human engineers, particularly regarding defensive systems that could theoretically counter railgun fire. The galaxy settled into a new normal. Human ships became common sights at Council stations. Multiple species signed defensive pacts with Earth. The insurance rates for vessels traveling through human-protected space dropped to the lowest in recorded history. Pirate activity in those sectors essentially ceased. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of her flagship, reviewing after-action reports from the Crest engagement. They had fired 16 railgun rounds total, 0 casualties on either side. Mission accomplished with minimal resource expenditure, the kind of clean result that made strategic sense. David sat in his quarters that evening, reading diplomatic reports and responding to messages. The galaxy had learned several important lessons in a very short time. Technology could advance in unexpected directions. Old methods weren't necessarily obsolete. Power needed to be paired with responsibility. And sometimes the best way to avoid war was to demonstrate exactly what war would cost. The railgun revolution had reshaped galactic military thinking in under a year, not through threats or intimidation, but through simple demonstration of physics. Mass times velocity, kinetic energy, universal laws that worked the same everywhere in the universe. The galaxy had trembled from a single blast, then learned to respect the ones who pulled the trigger.